Good afternoon, everybody. Today is June 2nd, Friday, June 2nd. It's 3 o'clock, and this is the Town of Dewey Beach Town Council Workshop and Meeting. It's being held at the Life Station as well via Zoom. The purpose of this meeting, sole purpose of this meeting, is to go through plans and concepts around our new town hall. I'd like to convene the Town Council Workshop and Meeting, and from an opening ceremony standpoint, please stand for a Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice.
Thank you. Next, we'll go through roll call. Commissioner Jasinski.
Present.
Commissioner Gibbings.
Here.
Commissioner Persinger.
Here.
Commissioner Bauer.
Present.
And Bill Stevens also here. We also have the Chief speak, as well as Town Manager Bill Zolper. Fred Townsend, our council, is, I believe, is on his way, but we're going to get started, and hopefully we'll meet him for. We'll pause if there's anything that we do need him for, and move on. First, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'd like to open up the floor now. We know that this is for Town Hall. If anybody would like to come and speak for public comment, please do so. I'll open up first the floor here at the Life Saving Station. Not seeing anyone. Kate, is there anyone?
A few more people coming.
All right, I'll pause on the. All right, everyone yell surprise. Well, because of the magnitude of some of the decisions, I'd like to allow people to make public comment with the elements as we move forward. With that being said, first, any updates and announcements before we get in? Town Manager, that you like?
No, sir.
Okay. Number one on the agenda, discuss and possibly vote on the budget amount for construction of the proposed town hall and police station. If I could, I'd like to just start with a little bit of framework and then open it up for discussion among the council, as well as then allow for any public comment. There was, I believe, an oversight in the program that was developed by GMB Architects. Mr. Dees and Mr. Zolper reviewed the town hall designs and questioned the overall, just looking at the plat itself, how it could possibly get to 18,000 square feet. Upon further review, I believe there's a few different errors in the calculation, and what it really came down to is that, and I'll allow Mr. Zolper if you want to also add a few things. It isn't a $9 million that we were looking at, or 8.6. It's actually 6.6. We believe that part of that had to do with including the garage underneath in terms of the overall square footage, as well as some additional space. Mr. Zolper, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So the current building that the town operates in for administrative and for police is not sufficient to support the public safety and the administrative responsibilities of the town. Do we do it now? Yes, we do. Is it working? Is it efficient, effectively to service the folks of the town? Police officers, to house the folks that are actually working in there day in and day out? It's not. It's over 20 years old. It's in need of repair. There has been some mold. There was a fan installed that runs 24/7 underneath there to try to keep the air moving so that we don't continually get mold there. We've had mold up into the attic. We have brought people in, and they've addressed that, professionals that have addressed that. In over 2 years that I've been there, one of the things I noticed when I first got here after about 6 months was that the building is too small for the current needs of Dewey Beach. Dewey Beach used to be a town, for the most part, that after Thanksgiving and between Thanksgiving and Easter, there wasn't too much going on. That's not the case anymore. We have at least 4 to 5 restaurants now, bars that are open almost every weekend, if not through the year. That attracts people. Rehoboth has a number of different functions that go on throughout the year. And Dewey Beach is actually sponsoring some things that go on during the off season. So when that happens, it brings more people into town. Also, this time last year, we had about 160 building permits. Right now, we're up to 280 building permits. Those people are here to provide some more information on that. As the town grows, and I don't mean grows by boundaries physically, but grows by population being here more than just during the summer when we go up to about 20,000 people, we need a town hall and a police station that can support that population that's here, even in the off season. I think we're moving in the right direction. The town's been very supportive. The commissioners and the mayor have been very supportive since I've gotten here. I think we've had a great working relationship. I think over a year ago, when we identified the problems in the current town hall, there was information that was put out through the Cape Gazette on some of the problems that we have in the current town hall, especially in the police station, where we don't actually have a holding cell. We have a bench that people just get handcuffed to. We cannot continue to operate like that. If you want to call yourself a town, we've got to progress like all the other towns have around us. When you have 20,000 people in an active nightlife in a town like this, we need to be able to address that. We need to be able to conduct safe operations in the town so the residents of the town can feel like when they lay down at night, they're in a safe environment. When their kids are out walking around on the street, they're in a safe environment. And part of that is having a new town hall and police station. So when we looked at the specs, Chief Mackard and I and the mayor about a year ago, we came up with some specs, and it was about 13,000 square feet. And that included the town hall admin side in the police department, some space that you would call the hallways, right, which aren't actually the offices, but you need to have the hallways in other areas. That's what we came up with. The plan that last week, the actual workspace area with the hallways on the 2 floors came up right about 13,000 square feet. So really, from the time that we proposed this over a year ago with the working space to the proposal we had last month during the meeting, actual workspace didn't increase. What increases, our concerns about sea level rise, about flooding, putting the building actually up. So if we have a major storm, the town hall is not going to be affected. But when you do that, it costs a lot more to raise the building up and to do those things. The other thing we brought in was the paramedics. The paramedics have been with us over 8 months now. Last meeting, if you were here at the meeting or you watched it, you saw how the paramedics made over 500 runs out of their office, which is behind the code enforcement building. It's a huge benefit having the paramedics part of the town administrative and part of the town hall, I would say. So their response time, instead of coming from Plantation Road, they're right here. Their time to get through traffic on Route 1 during the summer was cut in half sometimes, and they presented that last time at the meeting. So if we wanted to have the paramedics part of this building also, that would be in the back. We would give them a garage for their vehicle, and then above that space so they could have bunks, a kitchen, like a little control area, and a shower. So that was all put in after we talked about the initial. So when you take everything into consideration, we already have the lot. We don't have to go out and buy a lot. We already have the lot. It's a great lot to have right there on Route 1. It'd be nice to have it all identified on Route 1. So when everybody's coming through north and southbound, over 18,000 cars a day go each direction, they could see our town hall. And then of course the police station would be in that also. So with that, Mayor, I would just ask the commissioners that we go ahead and move forward. And the longer we wait, the more expensive the town hall is going to be. We've been kicking this can down the road about a year. We've talked about it in several different meetings over the last year. And I think it's time that we get some footage on this and we really start moving forward, because once we get the okay from the commissioners and the public to move forward on this, it's gonna be, we're gonna have to put it out for bids. It's just not gonna happen overnight. We'd like to break ground possibly sometime in fall or the winter.
Mr. Stolper, thank you for the comment. I just want for clarity for everyone to know that what we're proposing and what has been put forth thus far is to put the new town hall on Route 1. So where the code enforcement and the parking lot are going to be built, or are currently, that would be bulldozed. The new town hall would be built. And while that's being built, we'd still be in the old town hall. Upon completion, certificate of occupancy, move over. And then the second phase would be to tear down the town hall and put the Sally Port in the back.
And the
So-
paramedics.
And the paramedics. So
Right.
it's functionally. Good, Mr.
Well, I just had a comment. I think I was a fairly vocal critic of yes, I was. A fairly vocal critic of the plan at the last meeting. And, when I looked at 18,600 square feet, and although it was misquoted in the Cape Gazette initially, that's correctly stated, that's about 3 times what you have now. But it did include parking. And, I had a good conversation with the assistant town manager yesterday and an email exchange with the town manager. And, it's really a simple thing to look at. Just look at the existing footprint of the first and second floors on the building plans. And you can see that, in fact, in terms of the administration services and the police station, you have to add back in the Sally Port because that was part of the original plan too. But they're very close to what the original specs were back in, I think, January of last year. So, I appreciate the town's help in sorting that out. So I think we're, a lot closer to, in terms of a plan, to what they said they wanted and needed, in fact. So there's, as I said before, I think I said before, there's too much focus on want and not enough need, but I think I'd have to take that back a little bit based on the conversation I've had over the last couple of days.
The other thing to also think about, it's not just replacing what we currently have. We're also adding, if you please, the plans are available down in the back, a significant meeting room so that we don't have to be here in the life-saving station. That could also be open for the public. With that being said, I'd like to just also point out that the budget right now is presented by GMB is just under 5.9 million. And that excludes the Sally Port and the second floor. That's another 715,000. So it's 6.6 million that's currently on the table at 380 a foot. I'd also like for the record to just note that that includes almost $1.1 million of contingencies, cost overruns, what you can't plan for. So the assumption is that we'll have that buffer. And I think from what I'd like for us to have a conversation about how much council would be willing to approve from a budgetary standpoint. Obviously, that $6.6 million number seems to make sense at this point in time, but I'll open up for council or for discussion.
Well, let somebody else talk. I do have some.
So the question, I just want to be sure what 6.6 includes. So it includes the contingency that you mentioned, but it doesn't include fixtures, or it does include?
It does not include
It does
fixtures.
not include fixtures and equipment and that type of stuff?
That is correct.
Okay.
And I don't believe it includes approximately, so we may have to go higher than that in terms of this approval process, but I don't believe it includes the tear down costs
It doesn't include any demolition at this time.
at this time.
What do you think demolition is? Do you have any idea?
I don't know. I just don't know what demolition would cost.
I believe that for some reason, 300,000 is in the back of my head, but I don't know if that's
Has anyone given you any figures on fixtures? Like fixtures and furniture, you don't have any figures on that?
Commissioner Givens.
I'm trying to recall because I thought in one of the early meetings, we were given an estimate of how much per square foot it cost to dress a building up once it was built, but I can't recall what that was.
So Dean Townsend from GMB is on. He may come in and tell you that it does include some lights, but it's not going to include the furniture, but I would refer to Dean on that, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Yeah, thank you guys for the time. So about that cost estimate, when we mean it doesn't include furnitures and fixtures, we really just mean like tables, chairs, anything of that nature. I was speaking to GA Blanco, who is actually a furnishing vendor who through state of Delaware actually gives discounts to government municipalities through the state. But they're estimating for the building of this size, you're looking about, say, $500,000 to $600,000 for furnishing, just the size of this facility, which of course that's always subject to change. Otherwise, Bill, as you're starting to allude to, lighting is included with it. That's all wrapped under the electrical fee. Pretty much the only thing that's really just excluded is like tables, chairs, or if you guys have any special cabinetry you want to stick in, office furniture essentially. So that's really the only thing missing.
Specialized stuff like IT equipment, phone systems.
Right.
things- How do you kind of have an idea how much it's going to cost?
We did include a factor. If you look at each of the cost estimates, there's a line item A9, which stands for the security and communication. That also includes data in that. We're looking currently about $150,000, give or take, for your office. That's more or less what we're looking at right now, about $10 a square foot.
Commissioner Jasinski, one of the things I did have a conversation with our phone rep, and just as curiosity, and then Kate and I have spoken about this over the last year and a half. The things that we're investing today are transferable. Our phone system is transferable, will be transferable to the new building, so there won't be new costs on those things. Dean, do you have an estimate as to what it might cost to tear down the existing town hall?
Unfortunately, I do not off the top of my head. I do know demolition is usually a lot cheaper than any other part of construction. I think when you said earlier about 300,000, that's probably a fair estimate for most demolition, especially for the size of the facility that you have, both for, I believe, your code enforcement office, as then separately the new other town hall. So most likely it'll probably be around the $300,000 for both of those buildings separately. So it'll be a total of 600,000 roughly.
So, I mean, can we get copies of those estimates? I
Oh, of
don't have
course.
those.
Yep.
That would be helpful. So the $6.6 million includes police, administrative, and it also includes EMS and Sallyport, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So it sounds like demolition and furnishings is going to add another $1 million.
Put us up to around, if it's 3, and 6, 7.8 million total.
3 and
He
6.
said 3 for demolition for each of the buildings.
Oh, for each building, okay.
Yes.
All right, so
That's a high
1.2, okay, all right, so we're now at 7.8.
Correct.
I mean, I think we need to think about it in terms of that total figure and not just focus on $6.6 million. I'm a little bit uncomfortable, honestly, in committing to funding the construction of the EMS unit without any commitment from the county for the cost of that. Somehow that just kind of seems unfair to come to us and say, we'd love to have an EMS unit there, but you have to pay for it.
Right. So the current conversations, Bill, I'll let you clarify if I'm wrong. The current conversations is that they're willing to commit approximately $1 million towards town hall's funding. I don't know when that decision, I thought the end of June is possibly when that decision was coming, or did I put that in as a hope and dream?
So they want a little more decision-making by the town before they say, hey, we're going to take $1 million in the county budget and set it aside. They didn't want to do it per se for this year because actually if this gets approved, the code enforcement building would be torn down first, and the new town hall and police station would be built there. And then that's probably going to take a year. And then after that's done, the old town hall would be torn down, and the paramedic and the Sallyport, where the prisoners would come into the actual town hall, would be built second. So for them to take $1 million in this fiscal year and set it aside, right now, I don't think they're willing to commit that until they know we're actually moving forward on it.
Mhm.
And then they may commit the $1 million the following year. And I think that's a conversation between myself, the mayor, county executive administrator, Todd Lawson.
So let's look at, then again, trying to look at focus in terms of what the council can possibly approve tonight, knowing the information. If we were to approve the initial build without the Sallyport and second floor storage, that would be 5.9 million, again, including 951,000 in contingencies, 300,000 for the tear down, 600,000, so it'd be at 6.8 million. I feel comfortable at the 6.8, knowing that currently have in the bank right now 5.2 million. That includes a $3 million county grant, or the grant that we received from Representative Schwarzkopf, funds that we've allocated. There's another 250, so we're actually at 5.5 million if we look at the unassigned funds too.
Okay.
So
I'm looking at the balance sheet from May, so I want us to be kind of clear
Consistent.
on where all these numbers are right
Sure.
now, just so we're kind of clear. So, I mean, the balance sheet just shows the breakup of 4.8 in our cash and cash equivalents that's outside of streets and infrastructure.
if we go down to the fund balance at the bottom, David, you'll see that the town hall fund.
Not in this version of the balance sheet, I think is what it is. So,
Should be toward the end.
capital improvement town hall, there it is, okay, rainy day fund, right.
So is it 2 million?
Unassigned, 699, right, okay, got it.
But you got 2,187,000 in the town hall fund.
Yeah,
And then you also have unearned revenue on the balance sheet on the liability side of 3 million. So that takes us roughly to 5.2,
Which is the state money.
which is the state money that came in.
gotcha,
That's
okay,
enough.
gotcha, that's where you're coming up with the
Right.
5.2, okay.
And then we have potentially set-asides to be earned if we decide that in 2024, the fiscal year, as well as the possible allocation of the prior year's net income.
Well, that's, the prior year net income, I think, should be 178, isn't it? That's carried forward as an unassigned amount on the current balance sheet. So I think that would go to the Town Hall Improvement Fund.
Okay?
What we had talked about before also was committing, what's currently committed as going to the General Capital Improvement Fund, half of the hotel tax. So there's another $225,000 that could go to the Town Hall Fund.
So that's 575 in the current fiscal year.
Okay. There is also, I think we have to look at this over 2 years. So if we go out to FY 2025, there's probably, and assuming that we go to the full 3% on the hotel tax, that would generate potentially another $90,000 that could be added in there as well, but that wouldn't be until fiscal year 2025. But it still makes sense to apply here. So I think we can get to, just with the resources that we have available to us now, I think we can get to $5.9 million, maybe a little higher than that. You're coming up with 6.1, I'm not quite
6.1.
sure. How this, not sure where we're differing there.
5.2, we'll call it 5.2 currently, 5.4, the 178 that you talked about.
Right.
Again, rounding up 5.4, 225 from the
Right.
hotel tax, 5.6, and then next fiscal year plus the 90, add another. Right around, it gets us to close to $6 million.
Close to 6 million, okay. So that leaves us with a gap of $800,000.
With two ends of that. One is that, and for full disclosure, again, we have over $1 million, or we'll have 950,000 in contingencies on the upside, 20% that's in there, to, again, manage that gap. There have also been there are members of our community who have communicated to me significant donations. Right now, I know firmly of at least 300, but I believe that we can get to 500,000 by asking the community. If worst case scenario was to happen, I've also reached out to Fulton Bank. Fulton Bank would offer us whatever loan that we needed to gap it, which then the funds from the hotel tax could act as debt service. Currently at Fulton Bank, it would be a 20-year note at less than 7%. So on $1 million, it's about $120,000 to $130,000 a year in debt service.
Would we be eligible for State Department of Agriculture or USDA agriculture loans, like similar to what Rehoboth did?
We can absolutely look at that. I spoke to a few different bankers, and to get our business would be a feather in their cap, and so that those rates could continue to come down for us.
Okay.
Especially when you give them usually your deposits follow your loans. So our significant cash deposit that we have at the bank would follow whatever bank has our debt. So it would optimize. And that's the other things that we also, as of last year, we weren't aware of, the the sweep overnight accounts that are the checking, interest checking that we're currently receiving, which is around $200,000 to $300,000 a year, based upon our current deposits. Obviously, we're going to deplete it as we start using these funds.
We figured out how to pay for this at 6.6, close enough?
Yeah, I mean, not having it written down, I'm a little uneasy about taking a definitive vote and saying, yeah, we think we have a way of paying for this. I'd rather see it written down. This is just my preference. See it written down and come back and vote definitively on the 19th.
I would, my opinion is that it's not going to change. We'll figure out, we've gotten 90% of the way there, and I would like for us, as part of this vote, to move forward so we can have the vote.
Part of my objection too is that we're only looking at a couple of years. We also have capital expenditures that we may need to satisfy over a 5-year period. And I think we talked before about at the last meeting, a 5-year plan, 5-year financial plan for funding not only the town hall, but also any other capital expenditures. That's why I would really like to see a plan that we could all agree to, as opposed to, having numbers on the back of the estimate here or the agenda. I'm just not 100% comfortable. I mean, I'm not saying I want to vote against voting today, but just would feel a lot more comfortable if we could see something in writing.
Let's define what we're going to vote on. Okay, so the first thing is, since we do not have really estimates, we just kind of have guesstimates on fixtures and furnishings and demolition. I don't believe that we should be voting on that. Okay, we don't really have, we have an estimate for the building with the basic things that are kind of attached, your lights.
But our discuss and vote is just to approve the construction,
Right.
period. I mean,
So,
yeah, we're going to.
so I think the number that we should be talking about, it should be based off the 6.6, that the latest or the corrected estimate that you got.
Well, if we eliminate the Sally port in the structure and we focus at the 587 or 59, and that's where I know where you're going with this. So if we were to approve a $6 million construction to allow GMB to finalize the plans, then we can make a decision in terms of the future when we know about Sussex County and the additional Sally port, where we know about a firm number on the furniture and fixtures.
We're going to have another meeting to talk
gonna have-
about that. And
Yeah.
we may keep some of the chairs we have.
So what is your estimate without the Sally port and the EMS on the back?
$6 million.
So $600,000 builds the entire Sally port and everything?
Now,
That includes some other things, though. That's
the
not just the
5, I'm
construction.
looking at what is construction of new town hall plus possible demolition costs, which are also soft as to what they're going to be. And it's demolition of code enforcement. So it's not a major building structure that needs.
Okay. Great point. When it's not all written down, it's kind of, just to kind of keep us all in sync. So you had talked about a 6.6 number that you had, and that included the EMS.
That's
And then-
correct.
And then if we only decide at this today to authorize without the Sally port and EMS, because that's one building, right? Then you're saying that number is 6, or is it 5.8?
I would be more comfortable at 6. It's the actual number is 5873576. But that does not include demolition of code enforcement.
So you want a budget that includes demolition of code enforcement,
Correct.
which you're thinking, because it's standalone, it's more like $100,000 type thing? Someone who has more experience in this, is that?
We're looking at you, Dean.
No, I'm sorry. I was over here trying to think about too. Fortunately, without being the actual, contractor, it's really hard for me to pull that number out of thin air. I will say what the mayor was starting to say there initially was starting to make sense. But of course, that also gets into the murky waters of contingencies and all the unknowns.
Do we have any data from anything that's been torn down in town so
Jim
far?
Dedes may have that.
Could we ask him to help us out?
Mr. Dedes, do you have any intelligence about tearing down a building and the
Poorly
cost of the
worded
building
there.
similar to the code enforcement building?
Yourself,
Unmute.
please.
It's his first Zoom.
Jim, can you hear us?
Mr. Dedes?
Go on mute.
Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted.
We can hear you
sir.
now.
I can hear you now.
Okay. I don't have the exact figures, but I'm thinking for residential, you can get away with around 30 to 40,000 for residential. But that's simple, nothing commercial like that. They have to go look to see the closest thing we have was the demolition of grottos, and I don't have those figures in front of me. And I'd have to go back and get it to you. But I don't have that information before me today.
Okay, so
probably
kind of
budget for
going
that
down
too.
this thread as I'm kind of trying to think on the fly here. What we're voting on today is we're voting on doing a full design, which is then going to go out to bid. And we're actually going to get something that's a reliable price, you know, whether we do guaranteed max or whatever, from a contractor. So we're not approving a contractor bid in our vote. What we're approving is a
It's a
design
preliminary budget.
that'll allow us to pay for the design and get bids from a contractor. Thinking it through that way, and your concern that you mentioned that Sussex County wants us to be further along before they commit. And that's the dance. You know, the dance is that everybody kind of goes up by itself. I'm thinking that what we should really be voting on actually should include both, because Sussex County needs to understand that we're not just designing the front of the building, we're designing the whole thing, right? And when you go out, you'll need to tell people that they're going to have to give you an option if it doesn't include the EMS prior to them doing that, so we'll understand what that is. But it doesn't make sense for us to only authorize the front of the building as I think this through a bit more, because we've got to basically work with Sussex County to be able to get their commitment on this as well. At least that's my thoughts. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts.
We need to make the commitment. They're going to move in. They're here now. They know the value of it. Whether we agree on a price, is it $1 million, is it 900? It's going to be somewhere in that ballpark. So, I mean, these are preliminary numbers. So this is just to get us to the next step of a bid. And it sounds like we have enough money from the state and what we've saved and other accounts that's going to get us close. And then we'll take it from there. I mean, this is 2 years from now, we're going to need more money for something, I guarantee.
So I'll go back to where we were at the last meeting, which is we wanted it to be under 7.5 without fixtures and furnishings, 7.5 just for the building itself. And we're now in a situation where I think we comfortably can be well under that. So that's a good thing. I mean, to some extent, it was, you know, due to an error or an oversight, whatever we want to call it, but we're kind of in the range that we asked for in the last meeting. So I'd be hard pressed to say that we can't do that.
Your point's a great point, David, Commissioner Jasinski, in the sense that what we're approving is, you know, a square footage, and once we have the number, and let's just say for right now, it's $7 million, including the EMS and the Sally Port on the construction, then it goes out to bid. We still need to approve the bids as they come back in. We'll ultimately will do the construction, but this allows GMB to finalize the framework in which those bids are going to be developed.
Right.
So we are authorizing but not letting go of the money. We still have
We are
control.
approving a budgeted amount at
Yes.
this
Right.
point in time.
That means if GMB comes back with a $8 million one, it's, well, we've authorized this, so this is our ceiling.
Right.
And that's what we're giving the guidance on.
So we will
Build it,
still authorize
Keep it
the
under this
spending.
number.
So I'm kind of ready. I could motion that we approve a $7 million construction budget that includes the build out of the EMS, Sally Port, and the main building. And that budget includes the demolition of the front building, just that one. I think that's all I really needed to put in the motion. I don't think I needed anything else, but that's certainly.
Can I have a
like it's in
second
the
before we open for
I
discussion?
will second it.
Discussion.
Yeah, my question is, could we add to the motion a breakdown of how we would get to that $7 million? What does that include?
That
And
includes.
specific amounts for what is
So that
included there.
includes the the main building. It includes the Sallyport and the EMS. It includes the demolition of the existing building that's on the front, on the Route 1 side. And, but it does not include a fixture and furnishings allowance.
Okay, I understand, but I'm saying let's have an amount associated with each of those specifics.
Well,
I'm just afraid we're going to get to, you know, a number here, and then we're going to look back and say, oh, well, wait, we forgot about that, and we're not sure we're going to get the money for that. I'd like to be a lot more definitive in terms of what we're including in this overall estimate of $7 million. It's still a little fuzzy for me. I mean, again, I don't even have a copy of the estimates in my hand.
So you were asking for specifics about the money or specifics about what the money's for?
Okay, if the amount is $7 million, then that means it's X millions of dollars on the police station and the administrative facility, and it's Y amount of dollars on the Sallyport and the EMS, and it's Z amount of dollars on demolition. What is that? I just want to make sure that we have those things accounted for as we come up with a total figure.
okay. So if we broke it out, you got to tell me what you're comfortable with for the demolition in the front.
Yeah, I don't have those numbers. I mean, Jim gave a rough estimate, I believe, of 34,000. I think it would be higher than that. But I don't have that number for you.
That was it, 34? I couldn't hear him.
I heard 30 to 40.
When somebody else was 10 times that, you know, so.
Kate, is Kate there?
Yes.
Yes.
Ask, Kate, can you pull up the building permit reports and look for demolition for the reason? It'll give us an idea of how much it is, because I don't have access to that here. And we can report it back.
Put a amendment to my motion to say of the 7 million, a not to exceed 100,000 for demolition costs and a not to exceed 1 million for the EMS and Sallyport be acceptable to you.
And 5.9 for the main.
Well, it's those,
Yeah,
just
5.9.
breaking those two figures out are
One-
not to
one.
exceed. The total budget is 7.
Okay.
Those two parts are not to exceed.
And 5.9 is the figure that we have, okay.
Is that the motion? Amended
So
motion?
that's the investment of 7 million, meaning 5.9 for the main town hall, 100,000 for the demolition of the current code enforcement building, and another $1 million potentially for the Sallyport and the EMS structure,
And it was a not to exceed.
not to exceed 7 million in total.
And excludes furnishings.
That excludes
Correct.
furnishings.
Okay, that's part of the motion.
Yes.
So you accept it and you
I
accept it
accept
as a
the
second?
amendments to his.
Any other discussion?
You want to call for public comment?
I'll call for public comment.
Anybody in the waiting room, Kate?
All right. Commissioners, all in favor, say aye.
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 That passes unanimously. All right. Number two is discuss possible vote on the maximum building height of the proposed town hall and police station. I will say that, my inbox was filled relatively quickly with this one. There are, on both sides, where there are residents who felt that the maximum height should be increased overall with climate change, et cetera. I know where I fall on this in terms of where I'd like to see it, but I'd open up for council for discussion.
I'll talk about it. Yeah, so, I think I'm with everybody else. We're going to keep it at 35 feet. Now, we have to have a larger discussion of that because we also have a climate change committee, Gary chairs, that sea level rise goes up. So do we want to build a building that may be flooded in a few years? Who knows, right? I don't know how fast the sea level's growing on this, but do we want to start thinking forward of new construction? We need that freeboard underneath it, and I think we already approved that, Gary, didn't, was it 3 feet?
A freeboard right now is 1 foot.
Okay, but so what that means is there's nothing under there, so if you do get water, it's not, halfway up your wall on the first floor. Everybody's got to go up a little bit. So what do we do with a 3-story house now? We say, well, start taking your third floor off because you got to go up. and you're going to be over 35 feet. It's a larger discussion, and eventually the community's going to have to come together on this and say, what are we going to do long-term? But that's, since it's a larger discussion, we don't have that in front of us today. So I just think we need to stay at 35 feet and not touch it. But down the road, eventually new construction is going to have to start considering those things when they make those
So what
recommendations.
what you're saying, Commissioner Bauer, is that the town hall will adhere, your position is to adhere to the current or future,
Not an inch over.
not an inch over the height limits that is already set in the code.
So I think what we need to vote on today is specifically the building height, which for this zone, we have to refer to it as base flood elevation plus freeboard plus 32, because that's the rule in the zone that we're talking about. It's varies based on flood height. But we also need to be clear that we give them direction on how much freeboard we want the first finished floor to be. And the minimum is base flood elevation plus 1 foot. When you're doing a public building that's going to be around for a very long time, to Commissioner Bauer's point, I don't think the minimum would be really necessarily prudent to do it at. The question is how much more we go, if, on that first finished floor is what you talk about. And the more you raise it up, the safer you are, and the more you raise it up, the less kind of inviting and accessible it gets as you have to go up more stairs. I think, Dean, just make sure I'm correct on this. Right now, the sidewalk in front of the building is at about base flood elevation, roughly speaking, or maybe base flood elevation plus 1, or do you have that figure?
Yeah, your entire site is around 4 foot in terms above sea level, but your FEMA zone is elevation 5. So for the entire site, you already have to go up 1 foot just for that. And then the base or the freeboard incurs an additional foot above that for everything.
So 2 feet above grade is the minimum that a finished floor can be at based on FEMA and our own regulations kind of combined together. So, and this is kind of for the public to just, everyone to understand. The minimum is that first finished floor is going to be 2 feet above the sidewalk, okay? And long-term planning, I don't think it's prudent to do that very minimum. Even if you look at our existing town hall, it's probably more in the 3 to 4 foot range in that building. I don't know if anyone has any comfort feeling on how much that should be that we're talking about from that perspective.
Commissioner Persinger.
Your description of the required flood elevations is right, at least in my reading of the town code. We have in our comp plan a responsibility, I think, to at least consider a change in our freeboard. And it's also one of the prime recommendations that you'll hear from the climate change experts, that the easiest thing you can do in terms of flood mitigation is simply increase your freeboard. And so I think, it's one of the primary recommendations that the Climate Change Committee has also talked about as well. So I think we're talking about at least a foot. I would prefer going up another 2 feet, giving ourselves that additional safety factor. There is a question, of course, whether or not we have parking as the first floor. If you have parking as the first floor, you've automatically, you've got your first floor of finished space well protected at that point. And I think we had some discussions with our architect at the last meeting, and he seemed to feel that we could, in fact, have a design with parking on the first floor that still stayed within the town building height, which in this case, I think would be effectively 34 feet from grade. Is that right? Okay. So if we went up, could we go to 36 feet? Well, I guess we couldn't go to 3. We'd have to take 2 feet out of the parking level in order to stay at 34, because we have to stay at 34, right? Okay.
And so this is, again, I understand we'll talk about the parking in the next element, but I think that from our perspective here as council is to confirm that you're going to be at code in terms of that. But to Commissioner Jasinski's point, we need to give guidance to GMB in terms of the drawings as to how much freeboard there is in height elevation.
Well,
So
To Mr. Commissioner, Persinger, not Mr. Commissioner.
it's Commissioner Persinger.
Oh, what's his name?
To his point, I think that us giving guidance, if we end up not doing parking versus if we do parking, as long as there's not finished space, There's a limited amount of finished space on that ground level, but as long as there's enough finished space, we don't really have to worry about it as much. But the BFE plus 3, which is I think what you were really talking about, rather than BFE plus 1, which is the minimum based on our town and FEMA code. BFE plus 3, that's the building, the lowest finished floor would be about 4 feet off grade. That might be a minimum that we want to set if there ends up being a finished floor lower in what we ultimately decide. I would be okay with that. I think that would be a hybrid of long-term safety, for the building, not trying to go to the minimum.
Okay. So do we have a motion in terms of how we're going to address the height?
Well, I mean, I certainly don't think that we should be going over the code, which is BFE plus 1 plus 32.
So what I'm thinking right now is that if we put that as part of, a
Are you asking me to make a
decision.
motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
From a decision standpoint, and then as we go into parking, we can determine
Okay,
the
so-
And
plus and minus.
excuse me, as you make the motion, can you give concrete numbers to each of those
Yeah.
things?
So the motion will be that the building to be designed does not exceed the town's height limit, which is base flood elevation plus 1 foot of freeboard plus 32 feet. Also, in the motion, we will have a design objective that regardless of whether we do parking or not, that the lowest finished floor in the building will not be below base flood elevation plus 3 feet. That's the motion.
I'll second that.
Well, then I'll ask from a discussion standpoint, what happens in the case in which the climate change or planning and zoning come back forward and say we need to raise by a foot or 2 feet? And we,
Well, what I would tell you is that when they go to do it from a practical point of view, I would be hard pressed to see them raising it beyond BFE plus 3 in terms of
Okay,
what people,
fair enough.
what coastal communities do. That would be, if they were to go to BFE plus 4, that would be a very drastic zoning code.
okay.
Mr. Mayor. So I've had this discussion with Dean, and Dean's attended some recent Zoom meetings with the federal government, and he can provide some insight on the base elevation if you'd let him.
Sure. And to that effect, nothing's set in stone yet, but they did have a couple of hearings this past month and even into earlier May. But essentially, HUD's kicking around the idea of increasing the base flood elevation across the board for all new residents and commercial buildings to be that plus 3. So it's already in the talks. The problem is they have no clear indication or date when that would become effective or mandated. But currently it is in the works, and they are considering increasing that base flood elevation to plus 3 for all buildings. So just keep that in mind.
I'm not sure I understand that. Just increasing base flood elevations across the board by 3 feet?
Right.
Well, wait a minute. So,
Okay.
so I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, no, it's okay. I mean, that sounds like a strange thing for them to do. I thought that they were much more analytical in making their decisions. But in fact, if they did that, then our building height, our maximum building height automatically adjusts at that point.
There are two.
Because-
There are two separate numbers and issues. Actually, kind of 3. One is what's base flood elevation, and to Commissioner Persinger's point, that's determined by science. They do lidar things, and they try to figure out what's your 100-year flood and where is that. That's your base flood elevation. Then FEMA has requirements to be a flood insurance compatible town. It says, hey, you got to make sure your people aren't building below base flood elevation, or you can't get flood insurance if your town you allow it, or you get a horrible community rating and your whole town costs a fortune to flood insure. So they kind of say you can't allow people to build below that, even if they want to deal with it. Then the freeboard is how much above base flood elevation you go. And so our current code says freeboard plus 1, right? And so when we're talking about this, we're thinking of it. Our height limit automatically adjusts in that zone based on what the base flood elevation is. That's why the motion has those numbers. So if they decide that they're going to arbitrarily raise base flood elevation without science, they could do it.
But then the motion changes with it.
But the motion would change with it,
Right.
to your point. So
Well, yeah, I mean, if they do it in the short term before we have put the shovel in the ground and started the building and finalize the design, I guess. I mean, at some point you have to make a decision. How high do you want to build the building off the ground to protect against flood? And, at some point, it's all going to be inadequate. I mean, the level continues to rise. So
Well,
you're,
it's, how do we
At some
keep it
point.
above the water and below the roof line,
yeah,
which is what we need to do.
yes, yes.
I mean, at BFE +3, we're really looking at 4 to 5 feet of water on Route 1 before it starts flooding the building, which is
All right.
pretty significant.
It has,
Well, we have a motion.
Yes.
We have a second.
Yes.
Yes,
Second.
I second.
Do we have anyone here that would like to come up for public comment? Sir, say your name, rank, address.
I'm retired, so no rank anymore, so Ed Clean, 106 Sweet Street. It's more of a comment, so I think, obviously in a coastal town, flooding is just one risk. And if you look at this being a quasi-public safety building, there's design criteria within IBC with other risks, I'm just curious if they're being accounted in the design as well. To be like risk category 4 of the IBC.
that's a Dean question.
Dean, can you address, please?
Correct. At this point, we're really just assessing the building at the risk category 3. In terms of the building codes, we're just for the nature of the building itself.
Could you explain what a category 3 is?
Yes, they have certain levels by the code, which they, let's say, I wish I had a structural engineer because they usually deal with this more so than what I would. But typically they have different ranks and tiers of how they evaluate the hazard and safety of the building, given the nature and the occupancy of it. In the case of municipal governments, they have a little bit higher risk category than that of most residential buildings, just because they have to be operational during storms or any type of events that otherwise are above and beyond what can be planned or foreseen. Usually, if I'm not mistaken, most residentials, they only fall in the risk category 4, but then typically for all those other municipal buildings, they become a more higher category where they bump it up to 3.
Thank you, Ed.
Any other public comment? Mr. Thomas? I'm putting you on 3-minute warning. Hey, you gonna time Mr. Thomas?
Hurricane season, everybody. David Thomas, 1 Reed Avenue, Unit 316. This is somewhat dated. When the need for a new town hall and police station, which I think is very overdue, first came up, there was the idea that it might cost $3 million and it might last 20 years. I very much support the idea of a longer time horizon, and I understand that the costs have gone up significantly. My recollection is that there was in either the International Building Code or FEMA or somewhere, the idea that particularly because the town hall would include a police station, that makes it a so-called critical facility. And that the recommendation or requirement would be that it is a foot above the 500-year or 0.02 level, not the 100-year or 1% level. That did come up when the 3 architects appeared. And the question was, well, what is the 500-year difference for that property? And the answer that I recall is that it might be around a meter, a yard or a little better. Well, so I guess that gets back to this classificatory system as to a municipal building. Is it in fact a critical facility within the meaning of that word and those regulations and whatnot? And is it a requirement, or is it just something that FEMA strongly looks at, considers, recommends, but that we're going to go ahead and do something else knowing that?
To that effect, I know we have kicked around the idea, we just haven't dived.
Dean, could you speak up a little bit?
Oh, sorry. Give me 1 second here. Okay, about that. So we have, we did kick that around, especially from the initial presentation. We haven't fully dived into the code per se, just for the needs and wants of it. We've really been trying to get across the hurdle of can we agree upon the program and get that moving forward for the building? But once we do get more further into the actual code analysis and requirements, that would then help determine that. Usually it is, like you mentioned, especially given the municipal facilities, it's always ideal to go ahead and elevate it for that reason. But in terms of actually dissecting the code, and if that's a requirement from that code reference, we haven't really got there yet.
It sounds like the concept of it being a critical facility and that elevated 500-year criteria does have vitality, but it hasn't really been analyzed yet. So we don't really know what the consequences of not doing it would be. Is that a fair statement?
Be a fair statement. In fact, give me 1 second here.
Wait,
While
Commissioner,
he's looking that up, just to clarify, my motion was for a minimum. It's not like set that that's the exact number, but that's the minimum.
Right.
Okay. So if
But you
during the
did have-
design, they determine that there's an additional requirement, they would still be able to meet that requirement.
But you didn't have a maximum building height.
Building height, yes, absolutely. But a minimum in terms of the lowest finished floor. Yeah.
Right. and
Commissioner
I
Briggs.
guess-
Just in terms of clarification, the base flood elevation right now is basically the height at which there's a 1% probability on any given year that you'll exceed that.
The 100-year so-called.
That's right, that's right. And if you look at that over 30 years, it's an easy standard calculation. There's, I think, a 26% probability over a 30-year period that height will be exceeded by floodwaters. So we're going 3 feet above that. I think over 30 years, 26% is a not inconsequential probability, but we're going, again, 3 feet above that. And so I think, we're giving ourselves a reasonable safety factor here, I think.
and this is public comment. We don't, yeah, go
Well,
ahead. Yeah,
it's a workshop.
I get it.
so,
That's
yeah.
true. Okay.
True. I like the workshop spirit. My concern is there may not be an actual requirement, but it may be so highly recommended that no sooner do we cut the ribbon and celebrate the opening of the building, but we find that FEMA or our insurance environment has changed dramatically, and that this concept of it being a critical facility becomes our nemesis. So, maybe we can squeak by and build the thing, but will we wake up in 5-10 years on a 50-year building and say, geez, it's a shame. We really got hurt when they changed the insurance environment on us because of that. That's my concern.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
I'm shocked there's not more public comment on it.
You pinch yourself, would you? Anyone else here for public comment? Harry, come on.
I did.
State your full name, rank, address.
Hi, I'm Harry Gallagher. I'm at 121 F Clayton Street. I've been a resident here for like 30-something years. As the mayor and the other mayor, through the height problem that was generated by Harvey Hanner and Associates down at the Hyatt. So I'm glad that it's more of a comment that we're kind of taking this a more prudent approach as far as height. And get rid of the height limit based upon needs, not really needs, but wants to do that. So I applaud the commissioners for taking that approach, and I thank you for your volunteer time and efforts that you put into the town. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment? All right, not
Anybody in
seeing
the
it.
waiting room? No?
We have a motion, we have a second motion, there's been discussion. Can we go to a vote?
We can, but what is the motion again? Let's go back to, what is our code and what are we doing?
He's trying to trick me.
32.
We are gonna.
I was writing it down.
Trying to
And
trick.
Dean, we'll have the details for you.
Okay, the motion is that the overall building itself does not exceed our current town height limit of 32 feet plus base elevation, or plus base flood elevation, plus 1 foot freeboard. That's for the overall building. The motion also includes, sorry about that. Motion also includes that the lowest finished floor is not to be lower than base flood elevation plus 3 feet.
Do I have a second?
We had a second from.
Yeah, I second that, I think.
Yes,
All
you
in,
did.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good. Third, discussing possible vote the maximum square footage of the proposed town hall and police station. I think we've determined through the pricing that where the cap's going to be on. And for number 3, since the cap is, as Dean communicated last, that it is a mathematical problem. And so we, as Commissioner Person, we put forth, we know that it is based upon a main build, that the square footage will be determined. Number 4, discuss possible location of the number of parking spaces to be provided at the proposed town hall and police station. As we open this up for discussion, I think that there's 2 parts to this. One is the elevation issue that we've already communicated that we're going to be put in terms of the lower and the higher. But the parking in both the first and the second draft, which are on the back of the life-saving station, the first draft that was put forth had roughly 8 total parking spots. The second one had a total of 6 or 7 total parking spots. The parking spots, while parking is always an issue here in Dewey Beach, we've been able to live with our existing town hall without an underneath garage. My concern is in the design elements of asking the public to go up to a second floor. It just may not be as inviting as it possibly could be. But I'll open up for council discussion on whether we should include parking and not have parking underneath. Commissioner Barrow.
So obviously you need spots when your employees need a spot to park. So the question is it going to be on our property, or do we use town property that's public parking and use that for employee parking? I'd like to see a lobby that's on the first floor versus parking personally. That's my personal opinion of it, because I think that's more welcoming and probably more reflective of what we've all been used to down here. Walk up a couple steps and, there was Joyce behind the counter, right? So I don't want to look at the directory and say, what floor am I going to here? So I think we want to do everything, have something on that first floor. So I'm in favor of eliminating the parking as much we can, but to make it more lobby space than parking spaces. And then try to find wherever we can some extra parking spots here in town. So if we found 30 at the end of the street, so maybe we can have some of those for employee parking. I don't know.
Commissioner,
We'll find something.
More parking's always a better thing. You can't deny it. And you get into access for people who don't walk, or can't walk long distances, and that's important for those people too. From my perspective, the building being welcoming to people is very hard design-wise when you have a limited amount of space to have that main level be up one and the lobby be lower. It's hard to get there. And even if you build a lobby, you're still kind of telling people you got to climb this flight of stairs before you get to anywhere, and then you want to make it open, which takes a lot more space out of your building. So you end up, if you try to do a lobby at the ground level where the parking is, and then have a reception make it inviting, you end up doing like a wide open staircase and you're just taking a big chunk kind of out of your building. The other side of this is we're talking about a very limited number of parking spaces in the second draft. It's not that many that it really moves the needle in a significant way. And then we got a lot of feedback from the public not wanting to have to walk up a full flight of stairs. At BFE +4, you're basically walking up, less than half a story, right? Between the ground and that. I don't know. I tend to lean towards that we will get a building that most of the public likes better in terms of their interaction with it, with foregoing the parking. What I think we need to hear from is we need to hear from our public safety and our town manager about the level of need and want in the parking department, like how strong are those requirements?
Come on, chief.
Well,
as I had brought up at one of our prior meetings, I am concerned about the parking. This last weekend, we had 6 officers from outside agencies, plus almost every one of our officers worked, and our seasonal officers worked. And it's very difficult to find parking when you're eliminating parking. So if you have police officers that are working, they need to be able to be close to their car. They can't be a quarter mile away from their car if they get a call and they have to run to it if they're at the station. So I guess my biggest concern is, where are we going to park all our cars? Where are we going to park the transport wagon and our spare cars? Where are they all going to go if we eliminate most of the parking? That's a big concern for me. And when we bring all this outside help in, they have to have somewhere to park.
I agree. And I think one of the things that Commissioner Bauer loosely alluded to is the 30 some odd spaces, I think, that we have at the end of Rodney right now, which could, and I realize this is not necessarily for this decision, but could be used for municipal parking, very similar how Rehoboth has the municipal parking behind, I can't believe it's a restaurant across from Stingrays. It's the other Italian restaurant.
Sazio.
Thank you. And it's a parking area designed just for that purpose, and therefore we could have 8 spots there versus these 8 spots just for our town employees and/or guests coming in.
And I totally understand you want it to be a welcoming environment and not be elevated so high and where you see parking and it's not welcome to the public or people that are disabled or stuff. I totally understand. You want a nice lobby and inviting, and for people to, it's a nice setup the way it is now to go right or left and police and,
Right.
for permits, and it is inviting, and we have the parking right there, which is great. But since we're trying to do something new here, we just have to figure out how it works out best for all of us. And I'm sure we can come up with something for parking, like you said, we'll designate something, but we can't be too far from the police facility. I just got to make that clear. We just got to be close to it, especially with prisoners and things like that.
Just quick, Dean, and I'll let the town manager and then Commissioner Persinger go. The drawings on both the first and the second draft that you had submitted show spots out in front of the Sally Port and in front of the EMS station. Can you remind me how many spots will be out in front, right on Rodney?
It's approximately 10. It's the
It's
same
approximately
amount
10.
that we
That's
have
what we have
right
right
now.
Okay.
We will give up 1 spot for the EMS person that's going to be in that building. We'll provide them 1 spot there, but it's going to be 10 spots.
Okay, thank you.
So my opinion on this is, if you're really worried about flooding, we go up. If you're more worried about having an inviting town hall, we're already going to be 3 feet up off the elevation. Since I've been here, we've had 1 flood that's gone across Route 1. And in that parking lot currently where we have the code enforcement building, we had about a foot of water in there. I had my truck in that parking lot, stepped out of that with my boots on, and the water was almost up to my knees. That was in October 2 years ago. But since then, we haven't had that. And if we were up as high as what Commissioner Jasinski suggested, it wouldn't have flooded. Parking, as everybody knows, whether you live on Clayton Street or wherever you live in town, is a premium. And if we decide just to go without parking, we are going to be taking parking spaces away somewhere on Rodney Street. We will, whether it's down at the end where the marina is. We have 27 parking spots as of right now. We may be able to add some more once they're done construction at the marina, what they're doing. But we will have to designate parking spots. I mean, the chief's department needs at least, just for their patrol cars coming in and out, and they are take home, they need at least 6 spots all the time for their cars coming in and out. Our town employees, they need at least another 6 spots, at least another 6 spots. And then when the chief has her summer employees, for this year, we have 13 right now, 13 summer officers. When they drive in from Georgetown or wherever they're living, they need a place to park. My parking ambassadors that are out, enforcing the parking on the streets. They don't live in the town of Dewey Beach. They can't afford it. So they need a place to park. So all these people, especially during the summer, are going to need a place to park. So we will be taking those parking spots somewhere on Rodney Street or somewhere on Reed Street.
How many spots do we need in total?
Yeah, you're going to need at least 30 spots during the summer.
That are currently on the street. Let's just be clear, in our current situation, people are parking it's the same spots that we have right now in front of Town Hall, as well as the streets. And I think
Yeah, right now they
Kuzinski's
park,
point.
right now they park on the side of the code enforcement building, and that lot is completely full during the day
Fair
between our
enough.
parking people,
That's leaving.
our summer police officers, and just our town employees. Whereas before, we used to park behind the Grotto's law office.
Right.
That lot's no longer
So
available.
I think you've kind of answered one of the big questions, which is, even if we do the parking under the building, you still need 23 spots.
You're gonna need the extra spots, yes.
So it's really a question of, if you have parking under the building, it's 23 street spots. If you don't have parking under the building, it's 30 street based spots.
Yep.
You know, I mean, it moves the needle, but not dramatically.
So for clarification, underneath the building, there are only 7 going to fit in, Dean? Under the building, if we did parking under the building,
If you look at the drafts,
I keep counting, but
So one,
7 for the last one, 8 for the previous, but yes, 7.
2, 3, 4, 5.
the other side, there's 2 handicap spots, David.
got it. That's-
So-
Versus five.
8.
You're looking at the first or second draft?
Oh, yeah, these are all, this is the under building, this is going to be existing.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Commissioner Gibbings?
My question was answered. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Persinger?
Yeah, so I think we really need to have an entrance to the town hall that really is welcoming and where, you know, you don't have to go upstairs or take an elevator to access town administrative functions particularly. But that raises a question, you know, if you look at the first draft of the plans, you have to go all the way to the 3rd floor to get to the administrative side. So you really can't have all the administrative functions. If we just had 2 floors, you can't have the administrative functions all on the 2nd floor, or you're back in the same situation. You got to take an elevator or the stairs to take care of functions. So is there some design, and I don't
Yeah.
know, maybe the
Yeah,
second
look at-
draft accommodates that?
The second draft actually splits the building. The right side would be admin.
Okay,
You come in the door, you go to the right, kind of like what we have right
Okay.
now.
All
You
right.
go to the right, you have admin, you go to the left, you have the police. The difference is, for example, my office would be upstairs on the 2nd floor. The chief's office would be upstairs on the 2nd floor. The building, the room where we would gather like this would be on the 2nd floor like Rehoboth. There's no way we could fit everything down on the 1st floor when you have holding cells and you have where the police have to do their work and our building official and all. We just can't put all that on the 1st floor. So there will be some things on the 2nd floor. We've really tried to make everything that the public needs to get to quickly on that 1st floor.
and the police, the bulk of the police facility could not be on the 2nd floor? I mean, the cells that we have now are on the 2nd floor.
We
Yeah,
don't
on the
want
police are on the
people,
second
it's,
All the way back on the right. You haven't been there?
The police officers up there?
The cells are on the.
Oh, that's
first
right,
floor.
okay, all right, all right.
We don't want.
we really don't even have a cell.
been a while-
All we
it's been
have
a while
right
since
now is
I've
a
been
place
arrested.
where you just put people on a bench. And that's not a good way to run a
Okay.
police department.
Okay, all right.
So my question might be related to number 5, so if so, tell me, Mayor, to hold the thought. So we're up front, we have to be at a certain level to be above the flooding and so forth. So there's going to have to be steps, which also means there needs to be ramps, because not everybody can do steps.
Or an
How do
elevator,
we
or
make-
a lift.
Or a lift, okay, which has to be durable and able to be exposed to salt water. How do we make that front inviting, whether there's parking underneath or the need to do all of this?
So this is look at the drawings that GMB has put forth. I think it's going to be a real challenge to make it inviting and parking, just because of the elevation requirements.
It would be more challenging because
Correct.
the streetscape is really important. We don't
Right.
want to be walking by parking garages. That becomes dead space
Right.
in big cities and small towns as well. So we wouldn't want that to happen. So we'd have to do a facade over the front of that for people to come up if we were higher.
Correct. But the stairs, and I mean, I don't know the elevation on the first, what was proposed here, but I believe it's 8 to 10 feet high in order to have cars underneath.
At least 8.
So, at least 8. So, I guess, you know, I don't want this, as from a workshop standpoint, I'm leaning towards the not having parking to make it more inviting
Mhm.
for our residents and our guests, and to identify spaces in town as solely municipal spaces.
Yeah.
As you.
I'd motion that.
The need for, I think, 30 spots, if the spaces underneath were gonna make it all good, we didn't have to worry about it anymore, I'd be like, oh, let's fight for those, fight for them. But if we're gonna need 30, we're gonna have to find more.
We're going to find them anyhow.
We gotta find them.
Right.
Sorry.
So as from a town hall perspective, can I have a motion in terms of how to give Dean to move forward on the parking, which
Yep.
Okay.
Dean, move forward without the parking.
a motion?
I will
My
second.
motion is to have Dean come up with a way to do this thing without parking underneath.
I will-
Any other comment from council? Anyone here from public comment? Not seeing, all in favor, say aye.
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 All right, that being said, there's also, documents were submitted, I'm sorry, I probably should read this. Discuss and possibly vote on the exterior design style of the proposed town hall and police station. There were documents that were submitted for today's workshop. They were based upon the initial designs that were put forth. These are all, the ones that were presented are the ones that have parking in that bottom floor lobby. So I don't know that we can, maybe we can, now that we have,
Which file are we looking at? I'm on the workshop and meeting.
first draft.
Okay, thank you.
Um,
Okay, thank you.
So I think, a lot of good conversations, decisions have been made in terms of the budget, in terms of the height, in terms of the parking. Bill, as a side note, we should identify what steps we would need to do for, if we do need to do anything in terms of municipal parking versus public parking, especially at the end of Rodney, so the visitors that come to town can, and that even immediacy, not necessarily waiting for the new town hall to be built. I didn't realize we had that many people coming in. This may be, so what we're looking at here is the first draft, and it's version A, and Kate, the other one? Version A of what it would look like in version B. The goal of today was to give Dean a way to lean in terms of one or two designs. When I look at A, it represents more of the life-saving station, consistent with what you'd see in a beach town, where B actually kind of, it reminds me of Rehoboth for some reason. Now, we can have this conversation, or we can table it and allow him to do, but I think one of the things is, as we spoke about last meeting, is from an inviting perspective, is the entryway left, center, or right?
Center.
Center.
Okay, can you bring up the picture that I asked you to take today? So, that Mayor Wright's phone? It was a spam call. It was a spam call. So I just want to point out to the public and the council that a major utility pole sits right in the middle of the high wire pole of our property. And if you count it out, it is, it leads you to either have to go left, right, or to move the pole. I've asked town manager to reach out to DP&L because it's a high power line. They are not willing right now to budge unless if Ernie Lopez was still in our corner. We found a way to have them move that pole left to right. I would imagine that if we were to have it move it would be towards the right, because that's closer to the new grottos versus left, which is closer to a residence. But if you were to look left of where that pole is, there's a significant distance to where the next pole is.
Is it actually dead center? Did anyone measure? Did anyone measure?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And is that one that's also like dead center in the sidewalk so that strollers and wheelchairs can't get around?
That's a
it?
little bit farther back. It is a
Okay.
little farther back, so you don't have to walk around that if you're walking and north to south.
Yeah.
Fortunate.
Because that would be one that they were talking about moving.
We can, the reason why I bring this up is we asked Steve to move forward with, run some drawings for us, again, to finalize this element. That pole becomes a major issue. So I'll open up for questions for council.
So Dean, I actually have a question. Jim, you go ahead. Sorry, Jim, you have your hand up.
Mr. Dedes? You're on mute once again.
I spoke to Jim Smith, who is a government liaison with Delmarva Power, about that about 6 months ago. I asked him, I said, can Delmarva Power do the town a massive favor and remove the pole? Exactly what we're talking about today. The short answer was probably not. And he explained to us that this is a major power line and it would actually cut down power all the way down to past the Indian River Bridge into Bethany. And of course, probably it would cut power further into Rehoboth. He said he would be surprised that they would even consider that, let alone the cost of putting this in. So I did reach out. He didn't think it was possible, but he didn't absolutely say no. So we can go back and explore it again.
So my question that I was going to ask is for Dean. So Dean, when you look at your second draft drawing that you gave us, in front of the building, there's a round symbol with two little things coming out of it. Is that the pole? Because if that's the pole, it's off center and it's actually just adjacent to the entrance. It's not right in front of it.
That piece that you're referring to where it's just a circle and there's two lines sticking out of it, that's the hole, based off the survey that was provided to us.
So my point, so commissioners, if you look at drawing number 2, you'll see that it's actually kind of just outside where the entrance is, where the double doors are and the windows are. It's not actually directly in front. It's slightly left.
So let's go into the assumption that that pole's not moving, the pole's staying there. Go for center or right center? No, it's.
Go right center.
When you say right center, you mean not on the corner, you mean kind of just off to the right?
Yeah, move it away from the pole.
So closer to the driveway, further away from the residence. Okay, but as long as it's not right.
Center to
at-
right center. I can't see it on the left. Well, but we got our one answer, which is the pole's not going anywhere.
The DPNL said at this time, they don't foresee that pole moving.
I mean, this is kind of my take, is that given, I was afraid it was dead in front of the doors, which would just be terrible.
Can't open a door to pole.
Given where it is it desirable? Heck no. But it's not the end of the world, given it's out of that little envelope, that's right there. And if they moved it, they might end up moving it where it's still in front of the building at some point. It's just, further towards one side or another. So I don't even know how much we'd really gain, unless they moved it to completely in front of someone else's property, which I'm sure they'd be thrilled about. So
I mean,
don't know.
it's just offsetting it,
Yeah.
5 to 10 feet from
Yeah.
where the center of the building is.
Yeah.
Just right.
Yeah.
So just not all the way down at the corner, but a little bit to the right, so they got good egress from the.
So I think we're coming back, center or right center, let Dean come up with the drawing.
My preference is actually where it is now, in the
Okay.
center. I mean,
That's fair.
just, yeah.
What about in terms of the design elements of life-saving station looking versus non-life-saving station looking?
I like the lighthouse saving station. I don't want us to look like a copy of Rehoboth.
This, it is. Imagine it flipped, or imagine that in the middle.
Okay. So this thing is in the middle there.
When you like the one that's,
With the circle in it?
Can you bring up the two drawings again,
They
Kate?
both have circles. They both will have the thing, seal.
Well, looking at the screen, which one do you like?
A,
That's A, okay.
this is the roof. B,
Oh, I think I like B.
Both.
I like both. I'm
I'm
with
not married to
Gary.
either one. I mean,
I strongly feel that B looks like we're trying to be Rehoboth's little cousin.
okay. Let's go the other way then. I'll change my mind.
That's the way to get everyone to go together.
And
Howard persuasion there, Elizabeth. I'm with you.
So,
I'm going A.
all right. Are you, I like.
I
this.
actually wanted A the whole time.
Okay.
It's a trick. you know,
All right, so then, can we have a motion to ask Dean to develop drawings based upon the version A, which is based upon the lighthouse scheme, or the life-saving station scheme?
I,
Yes.
Before we motion on that, I did want to ask folks if, looking at Plan 2, does anyone have any really strong input on the internal elements of the building and how they're organized?
Is this a rhetorical question?
It's a serious question. Okay, that's fine. I'm just asking if any of the commissioners have any issues, because I want to make sure, that when because this is our last vote today, that everybody's kind of, okay, this kind of looks kind of within the frame of what I want to see.
Well, all right,
We do have an internal thought on some of the space in there, but that's not one of our discussion items today. But like we're in this room today. One of the emails we got was, why do we need a conference room in there? And for most of the time, unless we're talking about height, we have 2 or 3 people in the audience. So we could do a small room where we sit here with a camera on us, because I think most people are watching us on Zoom versus coming into the building these days. But something you could open up and do, use the other side of that as workspace for our employees when we're not using it. And for that rare occasion that we need to have, 40 or 50 seats, come in here.
and it would also
Well-
become helpful for training.
Right.
so we wouldn't have to rely upon the Lions Club for the swearing in of the officers, we wouldn't have to rely
Training.
upon, those events could be, so I do like having the meeting room, the size of the meeting room, whether it be for the police department or
Right.
for our town employees, and the ability to break it down and build it up. But Commissioner Jazinski's point, and this is more of a comment for the chief, going from drawing A to drawing B, my only concern was the placement of the cells. And that the cells went from the exterior to the interior.
Yeah.
It's my only comment or concern.
And we
Comment more than
discussed that in the
concern.
last meeting, and we were told that it was within code, because we had told when we got our first proposal that they had to be an exterior wall. And I asked Dean that specifically, and he said it met code because of sprinkler system and something else.
I think we're going to make a motion to approve the design elements that will conclude today's workshop. But I would ask, given the boundaries that we just created for the box, if there are elements that, if it's better for you and your team to move things around within the box,
Yeah.
and keep it that we're on par to receive our accreditation as from the police department, please do so.
So are we voting on everything being on this layout exactly where it's at, or? no?
We're voting on that on
Okay.
our first floor for under $7 million and 35 feet in height, plus or minus.
Yeah. What I would clarify is we are voting on that the main entry-level design includes commonly used public administrative and public safety functions. I think that
Correct.
that's something that we've all agreed on, and that what you guys decide to do and ultimately move all this around, we're not
That's
going
up
to
to you.
get that into the weeds with you. But I
We
think,
just want the public to feel invited.
but we want the public to not just feel invited into the building, but that for both the public safety and administrative, that on that entry level, they're getting their commonly used services on both sides.
We can move the cells to the outside like we
That's
talked
where
about before.
it's up for you to, you
Okay,
and Dean to
good.
decide.
All right, good.
Okay. So can I have a motion to approve a center version A.
So I will, sorry, go ahead.
One today, thank you. I would like to motion that we accept the life-saving station version with a center / right to center entrance that is inviting to the public.
Do I have a second?
Second.
No, Gary
Second,
have.
either way.
Gary can.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Did we actually vote on parking spaces?
Yes, we
Yes.
voted.
Okay,
We
I
did
just
not
want to make
have-
sure.
We got rid of them.
No, I know that was the intent. I just wasn't sure if we took a formal vote.
Not on commandeering this, any
Just on
Just on-
not having
on the
parking on the
lot,
first
yeah,
level. Okay, all right.
comments, town manager.
No, I appreciate everybody's support. I appreciate people coming to today's meeting. I think we're moving in the right direction. We're never going to get everything we want. We're never going to make everybody happy, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. And on behalf of the chief and I and the employees of the town, thank you.
Thank you.
Chief?
Same
Come
thing
second.
that the town manager said. I'm very thankful that we're going to get a newly designed space with adequate cells. That's my big concern, that we don't have jail cells and we only have benches. I find that to be dangerous. So I'm very excited about having a regular facility with cells and everything that we'll need to do our
Police
job.
department.
That'll separate males, females, and minors?
Yes,
that's-
absolutely.
what-
And I appreciate all your time and effort you put into this.
Commissioner Barrow?
No more comments. You know, I
That's all you
think
need to say.
I think what people were expecting today's meeting to be about wasn't exactly as advertised.
Commissioner Gibbons?
I just want to remark on my appreciation for the collaborative process that I saw working here today. I'm not sure that that's what was expected, and this is just nice evidence of how we all, town commissioners, town employees, are working together.
Thank you. Commissioner Jazinski?
I have no words.
Finally. Commissioner Persinger?
I do have one comment, and I think I've made this point before. First of all, it's very nice to see people in the room. It's, we at least know someone's watching. But I suspect you're not here today because a ready opportunity for the town to do more to inform people about important issues on our agenda. We have an email list. We used it today to tell people about House Bill 168. I think we should do that more frequently, particularly for something like this that has such a great impact on the town, both in appearance as well as financially. So again, I hope we can do more of those kinds of email blasts in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, everybody should sign up.
You already had comments.
Just adding to Gary's. I'm amending Gary's comments.
And from my perspective, I want to thank everyone who participated in the process we have. This is just the beginning of a journey, and we'll continue to work through, but now that we've got the guardrails in place, and we also have several other avenues of potential funding that have not been confirmed, that we believe that could significantly help us in terms of not only closing the gap, but potentially putting funds back into our non-town hall capital improvements, as Commissioner Persinger alluded to. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.